welcome. Thanks for coming to the Show Business Pod. Yeah, we start right away. There's
sneak it in.
Well, Mark Maron style is what I've been told.
Yeah, you get the gold up front when they confess to a murder. And
yeah. Well, sometimes what happens is people come and then we have a great conversation and then it doesn't go on the pod. So it's kind of weird.
I get it. I did the same.
Yeah. So why don't you start by telling people who you are?
My name's Andrew Steven.
Yeah.
And there's a camera in here. So I feel like you seeing me and you hearing me. My name is Andrew Steven. Do I need a title?
I think a title's good.
I don't know. I was thinking about this on the way over. Who am I? I mean, I do a lot of podcast stuff, produce stuff, but also live shows and write and just general creative individual, I guess.
Yeah, we'll plug the big pod that you have right now. That's really good.
Thank you. Yeah, so we just finished season 2 of the History of Standup podcast, which is like a audio documentary miniseries. And we're going to get started on season 3 here in a little bit, but it looks back at the history of stand-up. It's a very creative title, and we've had like Judd Apatow on it, and Lily Tomlin, Pete Holmes. I mean, pretty much anyone that you'd be curious to know their journey. We talked to them and folded into the sort of overarching story from vaudeville to Netflix to today.
Yeah, that's great. And your co-host
is Wayne Fetterman. Maybe you've heard of him.
Yeah, legendary comedian.
Great stand-up.
Also teacher at USC, right?
Yeah, teaches stand-up. So like the conceit of the show is kind of I'm a comedy nerd, but I came to comedy late in my life. And
so did I.
So there's a lot of gaps in my knowledge.
Right.
We actually met when I was working for Seeso, hosting a podcast to them, and I wanted him to sort of teach me about Saturday Night Live and Johnny Carson, and that kind of birthed the show. And so like he's a comedy nerd, so much so that he's a performer and a professor. So he's teaching me. I'm sort of the role of the listener, and we're learning together.
And you're on season 3?
We're starting to work on season 3 right now.
That's amazing.
So it's a lot of work. It's a lot more work than I thought it would be, but it's super fun and super rewarding.
Yeah, the podcast is very long form, but it's still very produced.
Yes, it's very produced. I mean, we put we tried to figure it out. We put it around 40 hours per episode.
Oh,
into
wow!
It. And like the version you hear is like the 8th recording. Because like we'll record a conversation and then we'll edit that down and then we'll add to it and then we'll re-record and then we'll put in we research and find archived audio, and like we're doing some vinyl transfers too of like this is the only recording of it, and putting that in and then playing and tweaking and listening and then re-recording and then editing, like doing commentary on top of a commentary on top of a commentary, and then all those versions sort of get edited together into the final version.
Well, I had no idea it was that much. I mean, I could feel that it was produced and you had a very cohesive message and every episode led into the next episode. I didn't know you'd re-record.
Yeah, I mean, there may be a more efficient way to do it, but this way it works, It's almost like with writing, you might do a draft and then sometimes you scratch that whole draft, but you needed to do that in order to get to the second one. But sometimes there are pieces you can pull, or there's pieces that you edit. Like I always say like editing is writing, like when you're working or whatever the creative process is. Like editing is just as much as important as the creation part.
Right. There's the dumping and the editing, and they're both important. Yeah, it's interesting with these long form podcasts though. There's almost no editing.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it too. Yeah. Like I love the conversational, like what we're doing here.
Yeah.
I also like light editing. I do another show with Dana Dude, who's a great stand-up comedian.
Yeah. It's funny, actually, Dana Dude, my dentist, keeps telling me about him because they're friends.
That's funny.
Yeah.
He knows everyone in a weird way, like business people, food people, and that's what the show is about. We look at mostly comedians, but other of his friends, we look at their fridge, and then that starts a conversation about. Like we look at a picture of their fridge and then talks about their life and
I'll
stuff
tell you
like
a lot
that.
about a person.
It will. Yeah. It will. But like that's very conversational. But we may record for an hour and cut it down to 45 minutes. And then there's the history of stand-up, which is even more. And that's kind of like I got into podcasting through listening to like the NPR shows, like This American Life and Radiolab. And when I set out to make my first podcast, it was sort of an experiment to see, like, could you do this style of show about comedy? Because those were like the two podcasts that I was listening to. Like I loved Pete Holmes' show, or like, what was it called? Oh, Tig Notaro's old show. Professor Blastoff. Like, I love these shows where they would just sort of like have these cool, sometimes deep or scientific or just sort of like talking about big subjects conversations. But then I also love the comedy of there. And then I also love these other shows that were like super produced and written and stuff. And I was like, is there a way that we can sort of try to merge those styles and make it NPR-ish, but still have like the charm of a conversation?
Yeah. I think you really nailed it because it has both elements in there. It's long enough.
Thank you.
But it also is not overly produced. And you're running, like, how long are your episodes typically?
We don't really have a set. I mean, that's the beauty of podcasting is it can be whatever, but we try to sort of hit that 45-minute mark.
Yeah.
Just as a guiding, not as a rule, but just sort of like, again, using editing as part of the creative process.
Totally.
Like, can this be tighter? Can this be more clear?
Well, this is going to be episode 7 with you. And so we've had episodes just under an hour, some like an hour and a half, some more around the hour mark. So we're still figuring out if there's a sweet spot, but we're also just letting it flow.
I mean, if you look at I'm a podcast power user, if that's a phrase.
I love it.
But like the shows I listen to range from 15 minutes to 3 hours long.
Wow.
You know, like,
what are the 15-minute ones?
there's a couple of like the daily sort of ones where they come out daily. There's one, there's ones that are like, I guess this one's longer now, but I mean, I still do, but 99% Invisible is a great show about sort of the built world design and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And those early episodes used to be pretty short. Now they're longer depending on the subject, but there's recommendation ones that are just like, here are 5 things to do in Los Angeles, and it's like a 5-minute, thing sometimes.
Right.
So,
yeah, I used to listen to Motley Fool Money, and that was a daily one that would just have like a recap of the markets.
I also listen to a 5-day a week. Yeah, 5 days a week podcast. That's theirs is regularly around 2 hours long too. So,
do you find that sometimes you have to stop because you're so in the podcast world that the production and consumption is just too much and you have to like stop? You're like, I can't.
No, I did. I came from music.
Yeah. So
and
did
so yeah, some overlap there. And I definitely felt that way. That's actually how I first started listening to podcasts and stand-up and stuff like that, is on tour, on the road, playing music every night. You didn't necessarily want to listen to music all day in the car when you're traveling. And so I started listening to audiobooks. I played guitar and sang, was a frontman.
Nice. That's why you have such good audio chops.
Well, that. I know we're jumping all over the place, which is fine. But I was, when I wanted to sort of stop living out of a suitcase and sort of, and music was, I was paying my bills, which was awesome, but I wasn't making a living.
Right.
And so I was just like, what do I like doing? It's still creative. It's still storytelling, just in a different way. It's a lot of the same technical stuff.
Yeah.
But so I started, when I was on the road, I started listening to audiobooks and stand-up albums, and then started listening to podcasts. And that's sort of how I got in. I forget the point I was going to make on that. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's to have good audio chops really helps you just start a pod, because all the intimidating stuff is not like, how to edit, how to take out the pops, how to make it sound good.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Although, and I don't want to disagree, because I think you would agree with this too, is like, there's a great quote that often gets said sort of amongst creative people from Ira Glass, where he talks about, a reason a lot of us get into whatever our creative endeavor is because we have really good taste, but our technical ability doesn't always match our taste. And the only way to get there is through time and energy. And so I think I'm all about like, let's get the best audio you can do. Let's soundproof the hell out of a room. Let's get fancy new mics like you just got.
Hey.
But at the same point, like, you can also do something with your phone that sounds good enough.
Totally.
But if it's compelling enough, if it's entertaining enough, if it's interesting enough, like, that's good enough.
Yeah. That's why I just started. I had before this, I had 2 SM58s, and it was audio only. And I just wanted to start. And I was like, anything I do, I could do better, I'm sure, if I spent more time, but I'd rather do the shoot and then aim than like spend so much time trying to get it perfect.
Yeah, and there's obviously you can lean too far to that side too.
Yeah.
And But no, so first I want to say thank you. You and Jamie and Vanessa on that episode have very nice things to say about me. So I appreciate that.
Hey, thanks for listening to it.
Of course.
Yeah.
But so when you asked me to do this, I was starting to think of like, this, because this show is a little bit of, it's conversational, but there's also advice and sort of things maybe you learned. And at the risk of sounding too preachy, I was like thinking, okay, like what have I learned sort of in my process? And part of that message is, especially today, as the barrier to entry to so many different mediums gets lower and lower and lower and lower, like for better or for worse, you just have to create, you just have to do. And sort of, as someone like I wouldn't consider myself a perfectionist, but I definitely have like the fear of putting something out that isn't ready.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is like, you have to fight that fear.
Yeah.
And really have to be putting stuff out there. And when I think about the things like I love watching people's progress, like other people's progress, and seeing sort of the transition, whether they're putting something up on YouTube and like you can see the early videos, or like a podcast and you hear how production and editing or whatever might change, or even acting or stand up. I mean, seeing someone who started doing an open mic, who then, is an opener and hosting and stuff like that.
Even Tim Ferriss, if you listen to his early episodes, and he says it himself, like he's come such a long way.
Yeah.
And part of the reason that he said he did it, I'm paraphrasing, but was he wanted to get better at having conversations, and he thought it would be good for his speaking. And it is. Even myself, I took Toastmasters when I was in college, but I didn't even fully realize how much I was saying like in the early episodes. So now
I'm horrible with that. That's why I also love to edit and produce podcasts, because I can take out any time I mess up.
Right.
But
I try to like leave most of it in. Otherwise, I go down a rabbit hole with the editing.
So easy.
I'm like chopping out words and.
But I think just doing the stuff is the best learning experience. It's the best way to showcase your talent. And fighting against that fear of like people judging me on, like if they're comparing you to someone who's, a pro at it, of course there's going to be that. But I think most people understand like this is a journey and this is a progress. And it's like me, they enjoy seeing the progress.
Yeah. And there'll be times for slick content and there'll be times for just off the cuff.
Yeah. The flip side of that is knowing like, okay, this isn't really ready for the light of day and this needs to be iterated on more.
Right. Even now, we had a Comedy Bunker show last night, and I started just doing more stories, like of the setup. Like, here's me, like getting the food set up, getting the chairs done, and I got so many messages, people liking it.
Yeah,
and I was like, why am I doing this? This is dumb, But people like a little bit more of yourself out there, and that's something I even struggling with in the stand up, because I tend to do more jokes, like kind of more like structured jokes. And less of the exposition storytelling. But there's going to be a point where I need to divulge more of myself on stage. And I'm practicing through Instagram.
Do in this podcast, maybe?
Yeah, in the pod.
I think
absolutely
audio
in the pod.
Although now it's video, as a way to sort of ease into that, because it can feel more intimate in times. And it's easier to forget the microphone's not there than the camera's not there.
Yeah, I've already forgot it's there. Hey? But there's also... You're kind of leaving something on the table if you don't give them video. Because in this world, it's like if you don't post, people will find someone who does post. If you don't do video, people will find someone who does do video. And so in a way...
When they're different audiences.
There are different audiences, but I feel like...
Like, I'm not going to watch... Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, but like, I probably will never watch audio version of a podcast.
I don't watch audio versions of the podcast.
But there are people who will only watch them who won't listen to them.
Exactly. And it helps you on YouTube, on that channel, super powerful, especially as a stand-up. As one day I'll start, putting up clips and stuff.
Yeah.
And
can I ask you a question? I want to jump back.
Please.
When you decided to do this podcast, I know we talked early on. Did you do any like test episodes, or was it like episode 1 of the podcast, the first episode you recorded?
Episode 1. Oh, like recording test episodes,
or just like content flow format wise?
I did a few episodes that. Early on, I was like, this isn't the right thing.
Yeah.
It was kind of a different style podcast. And I did a couple like test episodes with some friends, and I was like, okay, this isn't quite it. And then, but none of those got released.
Yeah.
So the first one was the Maddie Chimber one.
And then do you feel like you learned in those early episodes what not to do and what to do in the first episode of this one?
I don't know. That's a good question. I feel like it was more of a brand and marketing and POV of the podcast that wasn't nailed down. And so I think it was more on that level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I did that much different. And it was also like, I just got the gear, I just set it up, just, going through it all. So it was more of a process thing than I kind of had an idea that I wanted to do it. It was going to involve business and comedy. But the first one that I felt really was the Maddie Chimber one. I thought about switching the order and leading off the Dynasty Typewriter one because I thought it was a special one, but it was also gave me a chance to kind of ramp into it.
Yeah. No, it's just because we're talking about, sort of deciding what to see the light of day and what, sometimes. Do you like those early podcasts or were they, do you feel like it just wasn't the right show or like it was just too much figuring out what the show is?
Another good question. I think it was.
Sorry, I'm a podcaster.
No, this is great. This is great stuff. I think it just wasn't. I probably just didn't bring it.
Yeah.
I was just setting it up, trying to go through it, and then after getting a couple down, like essentially your very first podcast, I had never been a guest on a podcast.
Training.
So I was training. I was like doing some laps, seeing like kind of what works, and I guess really just feeling comfortable releasing the one I chose to release.
Yeah.
Only for my own personal reasons. Like none of the guests we did were off or anything like that.
But if you go to the Patreon page, you can get those.
Maybe, I'll have some exactly. They still exist. So, but those, and also even between recording the episode 1 and the release, it took like a few months.
Yeah.
Just to lock down the artwork, and then there's a pause when you start getting busy with other stuff, and then so I really. Excuse me. I should have released it like 3 months earlier than I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I really was delaying, and then I was like, oh, it'll come out this month, and I kept changing the release date from like July, coming in August, coming in September, and I was like, I just got to finish it, edit it.
Were you worried or afraid, or, I mean, there's oversimplifying it, but...
It was mostly actually so my music brain turned on. So I was trying to get the right intro music.
Okay.
And then I kept switching stuff out, and I wasn't happy with it. And then at a certain point, I was like, I'm just using this one.
Yeah.
So
you can change it later.
I can change it later. Exactly.
I'm your brain. Like I know that feeling so well. And sometimes it's easier to be on the other side of that and just be like, you can change it later. But I know that just like, no, it has to be just right.
Right. And so, but that 3 months, that's 12 episodes that I missed out. I could have been 12 episodes down the line, which the fan base would have been, that much bigger, but like,
or 12 episodes in the can. So if something comes up, you could like sort of,
right.
deal with it. Have that in the hopper, in the can. Both metaphors that I'm not 100% sure what they refer to,
fine.
but I know what they mean.
Yeah, we all get it. But right now we run like 2 episodes behind. In the can. So I have.
Does that have to do with the tape? Like when tape used to record on tape and they were in the metal tin cans?
In the can.
Is that what it means?
Like in the...
Like when you had the reels of tape.
It could be the film. Like the film canisters. Tape would usually go in boxes.
Even like the big metal tins, the circle tins?
That's a good question. But tape, when I was like the last generation did 24 track analog tape. And they would usually go in boxes. But tins were definitely film cans. If we had a producer and we're a top podcast, we could have someone looking that up.
If you know the answer, we could just Google it too, but it's more fun this way. If you know the answer and you listen to this episode, tweet at me and Latif and let us know what in the can, the etymology of that term. Yeah,
that is actually a very good question to figure that out. Somebody, even right now, it's like, when we do stand-up shows, people are like, "Can I get my tape?"
Yeah,
right. There's no tape. There's been tape for years, but
or
it's
like
still,
you have good tape if you have like
right. But it doesn't say doesn't you say? Can I get my video? Can I get my clip? It doesn't.
Yeah, just like on our phones, like the icon for the phone is it's a handset.
Yeah. Oh, you got the battery case. Me too.
I do. Yeah,
battery case is key.
Yeah, I do. I only use it about 50% of the time though, because it's so bulky. But when it's like I have a long day today where I'm driving all over the place, so it's just like just do it.
I use it when I go to New York or I'm out of town because I can leave the house one day and come back no problem.
Yeah.
Don't have to carry a charger.
I bought it because I just went on, I did like a month-long backpacking trip through the Sierra Nevadas.
Oh, wow.
And so like I took my phone with me and a solar charger and a battery pack for all, like our headlamps and stuff.
Yeah.
And just wanted a extra, I mean, I could go 4 or 5 days without having to charge it with that.
That's great. Do you think, well, you look great, by the way. You've been working out. And
yeah, no, I mean,
healthy.
speaking of podcast, my whole life is podcasts. And I'm actually doing a podcast about that whole journey of I've lost like about 100 pounds.
Yeah.
I went on this backpacking trip and then a bunch of crazy, heavy life stories in between. And so hopefully look for that in the new year. So.
That's super exciting.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking about that fridge podcast because I love my
Green
favorite.
Eggs and Dan.
Is that what's called? Green Eggs and Dan? Check it out. Danitude. Hope to have him on the Comedy Bunker soon.
Yeah.
And what was I going to say? Oh yeah, the fridge one. Because my favorite thing in cooking, I don't like grocery shopping, but I love going into the fridge and just making something great out of what's there.
That's interesting. I love cooking.
Yeah.
But I love the plan. Like every weekend, like I'll sit down, and I put together like what meals do I want to have this week? Like what sounds good? What do I want to cook? Like maybe look for new recipes. And then out of that, I create a shopping list and then I go to Trader Joe's and get 99% of the stuff there. But then there's always that one thing that Trader Joe's doesn't have. That you're like, why don't they have lettuce? Or whatever, something random.
Yeah. Oh, Trader Joe's will actually be out of things.
That's true too. Like their special stuff.
Which I appreciate. They're fresh. And
no, but it's always something. It's like I need like they'll have every single type of onion except for the one onion, like just a normal yellow onion or whatever. And it's just like, oh, we don't carry that this month. And you're like, what? And then so you have to go to Ralph's just to get onions or whatever.
Yeah. But, Ralph's is forever associated with the Big Lebowski for me. Yeah. Writing a check for milk.
For milk.
Yeah.
I've never used a check at the grocery store.
I haven't used a check in so unless it's like some sort of bill I have to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
it's
a dying art.
It is.
Yeah, there's so many bits about checks.
Yeah.
Even Venmo. Venmo is so weird now because we use it a lot, and it feels like magic money.
Yeah.
Like, did this happen? And
now did you just see Venmo has like a rewards program too? Like if you
really?
use, and then Venmo now has physical cards and like that you can. It's like, at what point does it just become a bank?
That's the thing is that everyone becomes like a new agey thing.
Yeah.
And then it's like, we have all these subscription services you can unbundle, and then we're probably going to go into rebundling.
Yeah.
The
pendulum. But it's fine. I mean, it's still moving forward. There's still progress.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the whole Netflix, Disney, people are like, oh, Disney's going to destroy Netflix. I think Netflix is fine.
Let me ask you this, as someone who's sort of been in the media world, how much do you think the change in technology influences the creation of art? Or do you think it goes the other way around? Or are they sort of in work together?
I think they're hand in hand. If there's a lot of history of the process, like recording a rock band, I'll use like rock versus rap as examples. Recording a rock band, there's a lot of tradition in it, and like you get the drums down, then the bass, and then you lock those, and then you lay the guitars. So if you're doing like a rock pop-ish record, there's kind of, and there's a band in it, the 4P, everyone knows their instruments. But then if you're talking about like hip hop, it absolutely is the technology. It was the drum machines.
Yeah.
Then it was like the MPC 2000, like drum machine samplers, that influenced it. And now it's Logic, and then it was Auto-Tune, and then it's Pro Tools. So things that are more dynamic and open to change kind of influence and adapt to technology. And also the younger generation.
Yeah.
Look how it influenced media.
Yeah.
We have iPhone, we have Instagram, we have YouTube, we have YouTube channels. So it completely upends it.
Yeah, one of the things we discovered in doing the history of stand-up was really seeing how in every time there was a new technology, like whether it was TV and then records, and then it was, I'm trying to think, I'm blanking on stuff, but TV again, honestly. And then it was, with social media and podcasting, like there's always like a handful of comedians who sort of embraced the technology and used that to sort of move forward. And then there was also those who sort of
purists
repelled it. Oh, that's what the other one, when there was like, I remember when like comedy clubs started to happen,
Yeah.
Like there were nightclub comedians who were like, why would you, like, you could just tour off the same act for your whole life. And now
Right.
that you're going to these comedy clubs, you're having to like do new material, you're
Yeah.
recording it. Like that seems like a waste of effort, you know,
Yeah.
which is, you know, it's funny to think about because
Yeah.
it's become the standard now. And it's just interesting to think about because I definitely agree. Like if you look at how much comedy is influenced today to get that hour special. So like you're writing for the special or you're writing
Right.
for the late night spot. How does that, like, what's the next, you know, generation of comedy going to look like? And how will whatever they're trying to do influence the type of jokes they're telling?
Right. I mean, Schultz has already kind of
Yeah.
changed the game because he's not doing Netflix as much. Maybe he's got one coming, who knows? But he's clipping, he's putting it out there, he's doing it fast. He's got a camera guy with him all the time. I mean, you can watch everyone's kind of doing some version of that now.
Yeah.
And then the podcasting thing
Totally. And
changed
obviously
it.
Twitter, like, you know, like, but it's also interesting because like if you look at like with Twitter, we saw a rise of like sort of one-line comedians.
Yeah. And Vine.
Yes, but there's also always been a history of that too. So it's just, I don't know. I mean, it's very easy for me to sort of look at these things and try to create like what's the big overarching like, and sometimes there isn't, and you know, that's just me trying to like put a bow on everything.
Yeah.
But it's just I just can geek out of just like seeing these trends and stuff like that, and so I'm always curious what other people think and experience.
It is interesting because now you kind of have to do everything. Like you don't want to leave one platform off in a way.
Do you feel pressure to do that? Let me put it on me.
Yeah.
I feel like I feel that desire too, but then there's this conflicting side of it where it's just like I'd rather do things well.
Right.
And so it's like this constant balancing act between like, do I try to spread myself out?
Right.
Or do I just focus
Right.
and do those super good?
I think in an ideal world where they didn't existed, I probably would prefer and have a better life not doing them all, right? Like if you take us back 20 years ago or whatever, you're just doing comedy, you're just writing the jokes, you got your club dates and you tour and then you guys set comp. Maybe that's a better life. I don't know. Right now, there's a lot of power in your hands. So if the gatekeepers don't like see where you want to go, you can kind of just do it yourself. But it's a lot of pressure, like you're saying, to build your own audience.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there's so many clubs in town. Everyone's trying to get into them. And there's only so many slots. And then you kind of need to be really good. But now you also have to be a draw, too.
Yeah. What do you think? I mean, if you don't mind asking, like specifically for you, what is there like a certain area or aspect or platform that you feel is like the most difficult to sort of
break into?
Yeah, or capitalize on or use to your advantage. I mean, in the healthiest sense of the word.
Well, I think Twitter, I didn't use it for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So I started maybe 10 years ago on it, just let it languish. So I feel like there's nothing there in Twitter for me anymore. Even like there's no momentum.
Yeah.
If I get like 3 or 4 likes and retweets, that seems pretty good in this environment. So I think that one, it'd be cool to figure out. I looked at TikTok. Have you seen TikTok?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely am starting to feel like, you know, old man generation because like the new stuff that's coming out.
But when you watched, I'm like, I totally get this. It's like a streamlined UI for Instagram. Like you can click through videos so much faster.
I need to spend more time on it to check it out.
Yeah. So that could be something. The Instagram TV, my buddy Maddie was telling me about it. He's saying how he's seeing a lot of traction on his clips there. So I think for me, the biggest thing is, since I am new in comedy, is that do I want to clip anything now? Mm-hmm. Or do I just save it for the hour I'm building?
Yeah.
And that's one of the hardest things.
Or can you do both?
I think I do both if I start clipping like audience work. So at the Comedy Bunker, I pretty much, have you come?
No, I was supposed to come once a while ago.
Oh yeah, you should come. It's been really hot.
I want to.
We just had Ian Edwards and Fahim Anwar last night. It was crazy.
It's Wednesday nights are always tough for me, which I mean, it's a lame excuse, but it's just one of those things where it seems like there's too much good stuff happening on Wednesday nights. Which is a good problem to have in LA.
Yeah. Well, it's the hottest comedy night in New York too, like Wednesday night.
Well, it's because since LA, New York, they're sort of industry towns, like people travel on the weekends.
Right.
And so it's like it's when everyone comes back home. And so it's these fun nights.
Yeah, the hottest lineups in LA are during the week because usually people are on tour, etc.
Yeah. But
yeah, I'm struggling just to even put up that first clip, which I need to do. I'm a little bit overwhelmed by the video editing. I can video edit well enough, but just I would love to have someone who could just, chop that up, put the clip, do the captions and all that stuff.
Do you? So I always call myself like comedy adjacent. Like I like being on stage and like hosting stuff, but I'm not a stand-up. Like I'm not a joke writer. Like occasionally I'll have a good idea, and that's usually a tweet. And when I say good idea, it's like half of an idea.
Right.
But so like I'm connected to this world, but not in it as much as you are in the like stand-up side of things, performance-wise.
Yeah.
But it sounds like what I'm hearing from you and what I'm seeing is like there's a really big push for video.
Yeah.
That there maybe wasn't 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you think, like, is there a reason why you see that driving? Is it just the monetization possibilities of like YouTube ads?
It's more
stuff
engaging.
Like that?
It's really our phone. I mean, our phone is built for video.
Yeah.
So if you have a phone, and it's so much more engaging to see a clip
versus read something.
Yeah. Just the same way it was so much more engaging to be on Instagram versus Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter was, you had to read it. This is visual. Now this is moving visual. And you get a good sense of the comedian through the clips. I mean, people text me all the time like, hey, can you send me? I'm like, I don't have it up yet.
I find this true about me, and I don't know if this is another age thing. Like 90% of the videos I watch on my phone on like Instagram or whatever, or stories, like I don't have the audio on.
I don't have the audio on either.
So like I'm just reading, even though it's a video. Like I find that interesting too. Like just
you have to put in headphones, and especially we're kind of
in public
or even most offices are co-shared anyway, so you got to have your headphones.
There's an example of how technology is influencing, because the whole like subtitling everything.
Yeah.
Like a few years ago, you wouldn't see that anywhere. Now it seems like every video is subtitled.
Yeah, you have to subtitle it so you catch it with the sound off too.
Yeah. That's what I mean, yeah.
And you have to subtitle it well, because you can blow the punchline if you subtitle it wrong.
Poorly, yeah. And then do you subtitle all like the ums and pauses and dots, or do you,
right? And do you use like one font, or do you move it around the screen?
Creative with it, yeah. Like what was it? There was a movie with Denzel Washington where they did creative stuff with the subtitles. I think Ridley Scott film, maybe, I don't know.
They did it on John Wick.
I haven't seen the John Wicks.
I just got into them this year.
I know everyone says they're great.
They blew me away. I was like, it looks like the Matrix copy, but it's not at all. And it's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like popcorn action. It reminds me of, like, I'm almost embarrassed to say, but I really like the Jack Reacher book series.
Okay.
The movies are
I only saw the first one.
But it's just sort of that super pulpy, super popcorn. Like every chapter ends with like a cliffhanger. It's always like cliche sort of stuff, but it's just fun sort of action.
Right.
And to me, John Wick sort of feels like, having not seen them, so I could be completely wrong, feels like the same sort of enjoyment you get at one of
it's fun. Like not much dialogue, a lot of great action sequences.
Clever and creative.
I mean, he's in his 50s, I think, doing amazing action shots and really...
Yeah,
driving cars off cliffs.
Did you watch both of them? There's been two.
Three, yeah.
There's three. Which is the best of the three?
The first is the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I watch them in order?
You should watch them in order.
All right.
I mean, it's not essential, but...
No. I will. And we can check back in.
And there's an example also of... I listened to the behind the scenes, and the director commentary, of they had like a certain mythology in the movie.
Yeah.
And they didn't explain everything.
Yeah.
So like they had like some sort of coin system to like pay for things, and like sometimes it's the coin gets you in the door, sometimes it like pays for guns, and they don't really explain it, and it allows your mind to kind of make up like what this world is. And then as the movies went on, they kind of peppered in more detail about that world, and so it really kind of builds in a really unique way, where I feel like a lot of content now, because of TV, where there's so much exposition, they really hit you over the head with everything and explain everything.
Yeah.
Where I feel like some of these great movies now, they don't explain all the details, which is great. It allows you just to kind of be present and let your mind figure out what's going on.
Yeah, that's something I struggle with in podcasting, especially with doing some of these more ambitious, histories, documentaries. It's just like, I feel the need to want to over-explain everything, because it's just like, especially with the history of stand-up, like I recognize there's a stand-up audience that's listening to this, but then there's also like just the curious history audience who may not know terminology, who may not know certain things. and trying to really find out what is that balance. What do you say? What do you need to say? But how do you also leave room for discovery? And even like, where do you find room for silence and pauses and breaks sort of in storytelling?
Right. Well, the audience for the pod, your pod, it probably isn't big enough if you're just doing it for stand-ups.
I mean, stand-up comedy's a huge...
Like if you're doing it for the comedians, I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it, 5,000, 10,000 comedians? What do you think?
Oh, I think there's a lot more. I think maybe that are like doing really well.
In the world?
Yeah, I mean, what do you define as a comedian too?
I mean, someone who chooses to do stand-up, whatever level. Maybe there's 100,000?
I think there's a lot.
A million?
I mean, you just look, there's a comedy club in almost every major city, you know, if not multiple, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe
there's 5 to 10,000 in LA.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and then if you start factoring like people who do sketch comedy, people who do improv comedy, people who are just writers, you know, like comedic actors who just sort of they like it. They maybe get on stage every now and then, but they're not up every night. Like,
well, that's the good thing about a produced podcast is that you can really, if you're saying a term that's too esoteric, you can say what it is. You can pause.
But it is also, but like you're saying, like, I think that's a huge part of building in that mythology, or like Jamie Flam, who's a big friend of ours, is all about that sort of, he calls it universe building. Like, what's the lore behind all this? What's the bigger story? You know, like, I think I probably might tend to the word of like heart. Like, what's the heart or the emotion behind it? And they're slightly different, but it's that same sort of like, how do you find this opportunity? It goes back to what you were saying too about looking to try to include more of yourself in your material. Like, I think in all art forms, like, we discover the content just based on its quality, but we come back to it based on the personality.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, because you start having a relationship with the person, and that ends up being like you've seen these people go on tour. Like, remember Anthony Bourdain went on tour?
Yeah.
And it's in a way you're just doing it to hang out with the person you know.
Yeah, it's hard to have a relationship with like a concept or an idea, but you can have a relationship with a human.
Yeah. And it's actually the perfect relationship to tour and do theaters or stadiums because the audience is already used to not talking and listening, right?
Yeah.
So they just want to hear you talk anyway. They don't have a two-way dialogue with you.
Have you noticed any change in your stand-up, either from an audience aspect or from a creation aspect, since you started podcasting?
That's another good question. I think the podcast is too new for me. I have noticed that, and this is something I need to work on the podcast and on stand-up, it's just having in rap and music, we call it like playing with your levels. Yeah. Like having a bit more dynamic vocal. Like, go up, go down, change your pitch. Try not to be as monotone. So
Are you giving me notes right now?
What's that?
Are you giving me notes?
No. I'm actually, as I'm talking, I'm trying to. Yeah. I fall back into that, just having a very kind of like, soft spoken, more, and my comedy's dry-ish already, but working on things that help, like smiling in between the bits. Changing, because that can be the second half of writing the bit. It's like, okay, you have the words, and then now you got to be like, okay, well, can you? Is one motion, or if I say this word with this emphasis, like what changes? What's
funny on paper, but what's only funny if Latif says this?
Yeah. Oh, that's actually really good. Yeah, I mean, if that's actually the key, is it's like this, it's so you that no one else can steal it, so to speak. Yeah. There were some comedians at the Comedy Bunker last night who are just really good at that. They're so themselves. Yeah. And no matter what, like no one else.
It's like you can hear that bit and go, "Oh, that's a so and so bit," or "That's a
right." And then it helps you get the audience in your rhythm too, and they start to have understand like your point of view. Yeah, you gotta have a point of view. And it's the other trope is like, or saying, more you, less jokes, right?
But you still want laughs.
You still want laughs.
Although I just saw Birbigli's in town doing his...
I'm going to see it on the 20th of November.
I saw it. I saw it before opening night. I didn't even realize that. I went on Thursday night, and then on Friday I saw everyone posting opening night. I was like, oh, I guess those were technically previews. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
Tickets were the same price.
I thought it's been on for like a couple months.
Yeah, it's a couple weeks now, or depending on when this comes out. But yeah. I only say that to say, like, I love Birbiglia because you can the hardest you've ever laughed to like move to tears in the same whether it's in a theater on Broadway or whether it's in a comedy club or whether it's in an alt room in someone's backyard. Like it's
Right.
like that's the type of stuff I gravitate to, and I recognize some of that taste.
Yeah.
But it also goes back to what we were saying. It's just like more you, less jokes.
Right. But it is very much your taste because it's well done, and it's also produced.
Yeah.
Too. It's a produced show with
But even when I've seen him like do club acts. Or
Yeah.
like
I've
that,
never
it's
seen
the
him in the
same.
club.
And speaking of full circling, like how I discovered him was when he was on This American Life
Oh yeah.
doing the Sleepwalk with Me story.
I think I discovered him through some of his Netflix ones.
Okay.
Yeah. There's the new ones is the one that's out right now.
The new one is the one and it's about to come out on
and
Netflix.
his podcast was really old ones.
Oh yeah, The Secret or that one.
Old ones was great.
He did like a early thing. Maybe it was a podcast, maybe it was YouTube, I don't remember. Or maybe it was just a blog where it was like my secret public journal or something like that.
Oh yeah. Because he had a sleepwalking thing too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And he did like the moth storytelling stuff too and
Right.
And so like I kind of backdoored into his comedy from like his storytelling stuff.
Right. Yeah. No, that's where's the venue where it's at?
The Amundsen, so it's in
Amundsen,
the
yeah.
whatever the arts center district is called, I forget.
Yeah.
With like Disney and
I got tickets, so I'm excited.
It's great.
Gonna
It's
go.
Wonderful. Have we talked about enough business stuff?
I don't know. Like it's already, you're keeping me on task.
I feel bad. I don't know. I don't want to let the listeners down.
Here's a couple questions I have for you regarding the business, which is, what was it like working at Seeso? And like, what were you there near the tail end of it? Were you there earlier?
Yeah, so I think this is a great lesson. It's also, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize a certain amount of privilege I had in this too. And so I don't, as well as even though I recommend this to people, I recognize that it's not easy. I heard about Seeso coming out, and this was, like I said, I was wanting to.
We should probably say what Seeso is.
Seaso was a streaming comedy service from NBC.
Okay.
It's like the Netflix version of Comedy Central.
Right.
So it was all comedy. And so I heard about it coming out, and around the same time as when I was saying earlier, like I wanted to experiment with a more produced comedy style podcast.
Yeah.
And so it was also around the time when there was a huge rise in sort of the companion podcast, whether it was like, we're going to watch through this entire season of a TV show and talk about every episode, or like
James Bonding.
Yeah, or it was like, like the after show type thing. And so I was like, what if there was that for like a whole network? What if there was like Seeso? They're really marketing to be like the comedy nerds network. And so if you're a fan of this genre of comedy, if you're a fan of this type of stuff, you would also be a fan of this. And so I started this podcast independently. And, from the very beginning, like I think Evan Shapiro, who started it, who's now heading up the new National Lampoon, like he early on, like the third or second episode, he retweeted it and it was like, this is amazing. This is so good. Like on the 9th episode, I interviewed him, like they were very, I think they were very savvy in sort of how they went after, like even acquiring talent in shows. They were very much like going after the podcast scene and like recognizing, these people have followings and they're already creating content. Like like they turned My Brother, and Me, a hit podcast, into a TV show. They went with, like they went to Scott Aukerman and like the Comedy Bang Bangs and like what are TV shows that you guys might have and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're plugged in.
So after a little bit, so first I started independently, then they helped me with like booking and promotion, and then they brought me on board to like make it an official podcast. And so I was there from the beginning doing the podcast, but I was like it was an official Seeso podcast for like the last 6 or so months of everything that was going on there. And I only had great experiences.
Yeah.
I think it's tough to do a startup it's essentially a startup in a huge corporation. And
right. A startup within, you kind of have startup rules and then large corporation rules.
Yeah. And I've been in different similar type stuff, and it's great because you have support and capital right up front, but it's also, you have a higher expectation to deliver.
Right.
And I think sometimes there can be conflicting interests. And then if there's a new sort of, if the corporate decides to go in a different direction, like even if you're having success, like
Right.
it can just sort of,
Or it could be this other guy's project who wasn't
Yeah.
there anymore. Or
so yeah, I wasn't privy to like what happened with it,
Yeah.
but I miss it.
Yeah.
You know, I thought it was really
it is
cool.
hard. It's like, because we all want more content specialized to us, but we all also don't want to pay for another app.
Yeah. But I think like they're like the sort of, if I remember correctly, their sort of bet was like, rather than create a Netflix, which is like $15-20 a month, you sort of get a little bit of everything. Let's do a bunch of hyper specialized
Right.
$4 a month.
And they had Saturday
channels.
Night Live, right?
Yeah, they had all, I think 41 or 2 years, whenever it was, of Saturday Night Live. They had The Office, they had 30 Rock, like all the NBC comedies. They had a huge selection of like British comedies, like The It Crowd and Black Adler. Never know how to say it. And then they even had like some other like Australian really funny stuff. And then they just had all this new stuff, you know, like they get like Tim Baltz's Shrink is like an amazing show. It's on Hulu now. Like obviously Bajillion Dollar Properties was sort of one of their bigger shows that, you know, it's like Paul F. Tompkins and all those great people. Dana Dude again. And
Yeah.
So
What do you, hold on.
Nope.
Hold on, that's in.
No, it's not. There's video now.
It's in the corner, though. That's where it is.
Okay. There's another one.
That one's full. You guys saw it.
I didn't see it.
Behind the back.
Latif was throwing his water bottle, trying to throw his water bottle.
It went
away
in.
For the audio.
We'll double check.
listeners.
What do you think about the podcast business? Because you were tapped into, you know, you did Jamie Flam's Gatekeeper, which is a great podcast.
Thank you.
You have your podcast with Wayne Fetterman, and he's a well-known name. There's so many podcasts out there. Do you think it's still a viable business for people to get into?
100%. I mean, I think like anything.
I mean, please tell me it is.
No, like anything with the where the barrier to entry lowers, the pool gets larger.
Right.
And so there's a lot of opportunity for people to make podcasts and not make any money.
Right.
Because it doesn't require that much to do. But I still think, I mean, all the industry analytics point to like, we're just even still scratching the surface of like, it's still, you know, on the growing side of whatever bubble.
Right. If it was baseball, what inning would we be?
I don't know sports.
You don't know baseball?
No.
Okay, the first.
How many innings are there
9.
total? We're less than half.
So we're at 4. Top of the 4th.
Sure.
All right.
Don't quote me on that because I don't know enough about baseball if that's accurate.
It's halfway.
I also don't know, like, I am a big believer, like, if you're making something good,
Yeah.
if you're like, I'd rather make something small and good than big and profitable that's horrible.
Right. Is that even possible now?
Yeah.
Because that was the old model. You could be top down, cram it down people's throats.
I think there's a difference. Like, I even say, like, I've had a weird amount of luck in sort of doing what some might call branded content. I mean, the Seeso thing is an example of that. With them, luckily, I was, you know, had full creative control and like could really do whatever I wanted to. It was really a great scenario. But so I think there's a lot of money, especially right now, to sort of like, let's do the Shell Gas podcast or whatever. Let's do
like there's a Trader Joe's podcast.
Yeah, and some of them are amazing and great, you know. But I think there's a lot of opportunity where, like, if you're smooth and sharky, you can come in, produce a branded podcast, and it's just okay, and you can take some money and then sort of like move on. So as tempting as that is, especially like certain seasons when you're like, oh, you know, like this is really expensive, or I'd love to go on that vacation.
Right.
Like,
and you're talking about you as a producer.
Yeah.
Right.
Or just any, so like, I'm constantly like, I think I've had luck and success because I've been able to balance, like, I want to be creative, artistic person, but I also want to be like business, financial, savvy person, and sort of bridge those two worlds pretty well.
Yeah.
But there are times when I like can feel the pull more to like, what's the slimy, you know, sort of salesperson-y.
Right.
And even that is, I don't mean, they're amazing salespeople too.
Yeah.
You know, like what's the cash move versus like, is what's dictating the idea. Is it like this is a sellable product, or is this just a good idea? And I think it's a spectrum, and you don't need to be one or the other. But there have been times where it's like, oh, there's a buyer out there for this specific type of thing. Maybe I could pitch a show on that. And those are always the shows that either don't happen, or I'm not happy with, or I regret being a part of.
Right. You're dancing to someone's tune, like from the jump, and they could change their mind at any moment.
Yeah, and it's just sort of like there isn't that heart there. There isn't that passion there.
There's no authenticity.
Yeah, and it's again, like I think it was on Pete Holmes's podcast. He had Bo Burnham on, and he was talking about like, look, if you need to pay your bills and if you need to like buy groceries, like take any job. Like there's no shame. But if you are in a place where you have a decent income, like you have good money, you're famous, even like whatever level it is, like there's no reason like you should be like someone else's puppet. Like
play the long game.
Yeah. So like I say that showing like like there are times in my life where I've done projects where it's just like I probably shouldn't have done that.
Right.
But then there are other times in my life where it would have been the right thing to take that project because it's like you got to put food on the table.
Right. Yeah.
So don't beat yourself up.
Don't be too proud.
But at the same time, like do stuff you'll be proud of.
Yeah. Yeah. If you play a long game, it usually works out. Short-termism. Everyone has to do. Life is a balance of short-term and long-term because you do have to pay bills. You do have to have income. But you always appreciate the artists who really put themselves first in a way.
Well, it's like the Conan quote where after he was ending the Tonight Show, he's like, like work hard, keep your head down, don't be cynical, and good things will happen to you.
Yeah. Just do the work. That was Seinfeld's thing. Yeah.
And I know we're going on the circuitous route to your question, like, is podcasting still viable business? Like, I think there's tons of opportunity because the barrier of entry is so low.
Yeah.
That what success looks like could be very different.
Right.
Like, what success looks like for you, who's just doing this in his garage office, is very different than like.
Don't tell people where we are.
In your studio.
I'm just kidding.
It's very nice. I didn't mean that pejoratively.
No.
I'm jealous of it. I wish I had this nice of a setup. But like what success looks like for you is very different than what it looks like for a media company who has like a staff of 70.
Right. Overhead is killer.
So like I forget the number, but it's like 90% of all the podcasts out there have less than 300 subscribers.
Yeah.
And so if you get over that, if you have 500 subscribers, you're in like the top 10% of all podcasts in the world.
Right. Yeah.
And then it's like the top 2% is like above like 100,000, like, so like so then that becomes really wide.
Isn't it like most podcasts have one listen or something?
Yeah. It's crazily small. Like, but all that being said, like there are Patreon podcasts where people are getting thousands of dollars a month. And because
tens of thousands sometimes.
But in this analogy, like, because there's a pay wall, like the listenership could be 50 people. Right. But they're making a living supporting those 50, supporting themselves, giving content to those 50 people. So there's a million different ways you can do it. And the more sort of technology is moving, like almost anyone can start this up. And that's both good and bad. Right. Because it's harder to be discovered. It's harder to stand out, but it's also easier to get started. Yeah. And it's easier.
That's all media. That's music.
It's easier to make a living because you can go directly to the audience.
Right. Think about how much music's being generated daily and posted, but how much of it makes an impact? Not much.
Yeah. Or we just have to change our rubric for what an impact is. Because it makes an impact, but just with a narrower group of people.
Right. Or it hasn't passed the threshold of the objectively
but
or
like you could have
being good.
Like, I don't know if 10 years ago you could have a podcast about the business of show. like I don't know if there would be an audience for this. It'd be too niche.
Well, Ricky Gervais had one of the first big podcasts, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was an early for comedy.
For comedy, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really started listening to podcasts around 2010, and they were a bit more produced.
Mm-hmm. Because a lot of them were just essentially radio shows rebroadcast.
Exactly. And they felt like radio shows. I listened to like The Business. It was like an LA-based show business podcast.
And a lot of them were tech podcasts too.
Tech podcasts.
It was a technology, so that makes sense.
Yeah, but like I was saying earlier, Motley Fool Money, I listened to that one. And then only more in the last 5 years did I start listening to other ones that are more conversational and really just use the medium for a different purpose.
Yeah. And so I think that in today's market, there's a very viable, market for this show.
Right.
That may be small. Like if you pitched this to a radio network 10 years ago, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
you would be laughed out of the bill. You might not even get a pitch,
Right.
But now there's a very real possibility that this could be a nice supplementary income for you.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, even like with music, like when I was starting learning engineering and producing and stuff, trying to figure out like how to do stuff, you had to learn from a person.
Yeah.
And now if you were starting, you would just go on YouTube.
Yeah.
And there's so much more knowledge and techniques and stuff out there that you could never, one person could never teach you.
Totally. And I know this is like a business podcast. And so we're a lot of the answer has been focused on the financials of it.
Yeah.
But like at the end of the day too, like if this brings you happiness and joy and
Right.
it's like not destroying your life, like.
Yeah. No, I love it so
like
far.
success doesn't necessarily mean that you're making money doing it either.
No, it could be that it's complementing. I mean, for me, if it complemented my stand-up.
Yeah. Or it just helps you learn, like, know, like there's a million different ways. And really, like, one of the biggest lessons I've learned in my life is sort of like to take the time and like, what's your vision? What's your mission? What's your passion? Like, treat yourself like a business in that sense of the word. But part of that is defining what success is for you. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with like, if I want to rephrase it actually, like, it's not that there's nothing wrong. It's almost more healthy to like actually have like a good definition of what success is. Because for so many people, like it may be in comedy, like I want to get on SNL.
Yeah.
But maybe one or two people get hired on SNL every couple of years. Like, is your goal to be on SNL or is your goal to make a living doing comedy?
Right.
And like, I don't think that's lowering your expectation.
No. Well, it's having two concurrent goals.
And it's defining what success is, you know. Making a living doing comedy may look like having a day job, but also being able to perform comedy on the weekends or something like too. Yeah,
there is a balance. If you have a day job, it can sometimes it can be better, sometimes it can be worse, depending on what it is.
A lot of times it can free you up to say no to gigs that you shouldn't take, but you might say yes to because you're desperate for that money.
Right, and allows you to kind of stay focused on your brand a little longer.
Yeah. So,
do you find that through the podcast with Wayne, that his awareness as a comedian is growing as well to like a different audience?
I mean, you'd have to ask him specifically, but we were just brought out to Duluth, Minnesota to do a live podcast for this like content festival.
That's huge.
So, there's opportunities there, and there's, like, could this exist as a book? Could this exist as a TV show?
Yeah, like, absolutely. It could be the textbook, and then you sell it to USC for $300 a pop.
So like in those, in that sense, of course,
he should absolutely have a textbook. That's like
just force your students to buy it.
That's what all teachers do.
You should pitch it to him, and you can be the publisher.
I know nothing about book publishing.
But yeah.
And then
I know for me, it's definitely opened doors.
Yeah, for sure.
Both as a host and as a producer.
Yeah, I think it's, I love it so far, and I'm hoping I can keep building it. And I'm finding that like, it's also, at first, I think it was going to be a bit more investing focused. Mm-hmm. And as what I'm enjoying about it is just the more general conversations, like the conversation we're having now, which is about business in general, interjecting some comedy and not making it too obtuse and too like stock focused or too.
But should I use Robinhood or Betterment? Which is better?
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't use either of them.
Okay.
But
that's the answer.
It's also not, I should say, not that I wouldn't, I don't use either of them. So I don't know enough about it, but I use a Capital One 360 account, which is great.
I'll sign up as soon as we
for loose cash. Stop. It's there you go. Maybe we'll get our first sponsor. What do you think about the podcasts that do Patreon and they post what they earn?
I think I like that they do it. Yeah. I don't know if I would have the
audacity or the
shame.
Right.
Yeah,
it's an interesting thing because it's like
I think it's better. I think people who do it are better people.
Right.
Like I judge them morally if they share.
You think it's morally like it's superior to show?
I think, I mean, part of that was a joke answer.
Yeah.
I think I'm a fan of transparency
Yeah.
and vulnerability, and I don't think those are weaknesses.
Right.
So yeah, I don't think there's any. That's interesting. Before you said that, I would have never thought people were doing it as like in a braggadocious sort of way.
Oh, I didn't think they're doing it braggadociously. I just meant like, what do you think of it as a business model? Like, you're trying to drive revenue from your Patreon, and do you think posting what you earned thus far drives revenue, or do you think not?
I know for me, if I'm donating to someone or paying for a service, like how much they're making or not making isn't determining whether I want to support it.
Right. Like you're going to support it because you're getting value out of the content.
Yeah. So I tend to, we're all egotistical to a certain amount. And so I tend to think that's the best way to approach something. And so I would want other people to approach things that way. And so in turn, I would want to post how much one is making on Patreon. But also, like, if you don't, like, no shame in that. I think most people who aren't showing how much they make are making very little.
And the people who are.
And so it's less that they're like hiding how much they make in hopes to get more. I think it's more people embarrassed about how little they're making.
Right. Yeah, that could be. It's always hard to know. Do you guys have a Patreon for it?
No. Yeah. No, the first season we actually licensed and sold to Castbox, which is they're like a Stitcher. They're like an app that has original stuff.
Oh, nice.
And then the second season, we did it ourselves and sold advertising. And who knows what will happen on the third season.
And do you have a lawyer or business manager that works with you?
We have a producing partner, the Podglomerate. They're based out of New York. Really great people. They're also doing Green Eggs and Dan show.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So they have they're like a network, but then they also do some branded podcasts and some white label shows. And so we met randomly and have a great relationship, friendship, and working relationship. So
yes, and they handle that aspect of it for you.
Yeah, they do. We just have a business split, and they handle a lot of the paperwork and legal and ad sales, and we do the creative stuff.
I want to run some,
and they're involved too in like notes and editing, and like in a way that is helpful.
Yeah, that's great. A third party, a partner is as much as we can do everything in a vacuum, collaboration is still so important.
I would rather work with people than alone.
Yeah.
Like even if it means I make less, even if it's sometimes harder because you have to run it by people.
I love working with super competent people, like all the photographers we use at Dynasty Typewriter, not Dynasty Typewriter, I had
Comedy Bunker
Live. So great. Especially Troy was there last night.
Yeah. Like I just heard an interview. It's another great podcast. Speaking of music and releasing it out there, Broken Record. It's Malcolm Gladwell's music podcast.
Oh, I didn't even know about it.
It's Malcolm Gladwell. I'm blanking on the other two. Who's the producer in Santa Monica? Rick Rubin.
Oh, yeah.
And a third person I'm blanking on.
What? I gotta write this down.
It's called Broken Record, but they just did Rex Orange County, who's like this SoundCloud guy. And he was working on his newest album, and it was him and his producer, and he's pretty much doing everything himself. And like that's a certain talent and skill set that's like awesome, like if you can do everything. But he was talking to some people, he's just like what's like your weakest instrument? And he's like playing bass. You might not have said it that way, but it doesn't matter the specifics. So he was like it's worth bringing in someone who's like spent their life on this one instrument.
Yeah.
Like, or whether it's photography or something. Like we all have iPhones, we can take photos, but it's just like, no, it's worth like paying someone who's this is their craft, this is their art to come in and do it. And
even this desk, when they delivered it, there was this old built-in desk in this garage, and I was like, I just delivered this desk and I'll put it together, take out the old one myself. And I hustled to get the old one out of the garage in time because when they got here, and I paid them to put it together because I was like, I saw how many pieces it was, and they did it so fast, so much faster than I could. And I'm pretty handy. I can put together most things, but it was pretty heavy, and there was two of them, and they're just like, and the whole thing's done. I was like, that was the best use of money I've ever spent.
Like there's value in doing things yourself,
right?
But there's also value in like recognizing the skills of others.
Yeah, it's because we all short, finite lives.
Yeah.
So I want to run a couple pod questions about my pod before we wrap up. So here's the things I'm thinking about doing animated logo for the YouTube stuff when this comes out. What do you think?
Yeah.
Good idea.
Love it.
A logo so I noticed like we're on the charts for
Like an intro package, you mean? Or like a logo that's specific that's always moving? When you say animated
like an intro,
logo.
an animated intro, like and then
Yeah.
it fades into the video.
Yeah.
And then also actually a little like, is it Chiron? Or like logo in the corner
Yeah.
that says like,
I mean,
while you're watching it.
So one of my pet peeves, and this is just dumb,
Yeah.
is like YouTube puts your channel in the lower third in the bottom corner already. And so sometimes I see people who upload it with like it's on the video, and then so there's like this weird like shadow overlap thing.
Good.
So
pro
maybe you want it
tip.
in like the top corner or the opposite corner.
Oh, so don't put it in the lower right-hand corner?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, just check on that.
Oh, wow. Look at this. Yeah, more notes. No tube, lower corner. Perfect. Next thing is, so we are on the charts for comedy interviews.
Yeah.
And I noticed that our logo there's a lot to fit in when it gets shrunk down.
Yeah.
And sometimes when they do icon versions,
Mm-hmm.
they get rounded and that cuts even more off. So what do you think about rounded logo?
I think, well, I wouldn't round your logo, but I would keep in mind what gets cut and what gets cropped. I also don't think you need to have one logo that's the same for the cover art, for the Twitter, for the, poster version of it, for the for social media. Like you can have different versions of it.
Different versions.
So like if you think, I mean, that's pretty common in business. You might have a horizontal logo that works better on like the side of a building, but like if it's in a square, you have like the icon might be stacked differently. And maybe it's just a letter, like Twitter has the bird, but then it also has the word Twitter, and so different applications have different uses of logo.
And what do you think about the best way to grow your podcast audiences?
Consistency, or rather than consistency, I would say like communicating your release schedule to your audience. So
like we're every Tuesday,
and like we're going to take next week off. We'll be back in a week, like something like that. Like let people know.
Yeah.
Consistency, I think like anything, it's just hustling and like getting the word out there.
Yeah.
So it's twofold. Like people who listen to podcasts are more likely to listen to podcasts.
Right.
So like guesting on other people's podcasts is great,
Yeah.
obviously. Big name guests are great for discovery, but like we said, people keep coming back because of you.
Right.
So like share yourself so people can relate. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint.
Yep. Consistency.
So like, and then anything helps. Like, don't be afraid to mention your podcast when you're on stage.
Yeah, I use that as my
versa.
stage credit now. So
There you go. And like make it really dumb simple for people to like find your podcast.
right.
So like if you have a web page, I tell people this, like, does the web page have links to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play? Does each episode post have links to those places? Like,
right.
It's amazing how many people listen to podcasts who still don't subscribe to podcasts.
Yeah.
So just reminding people,
Push to subscribe.
It's cliche to like rate, review, subscribe,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it helps,
Yeah, I try to walk a balance of like saying it but not being like overly.
I also think letting people know, like listeners listening right now, like when you rate and review a show on iTunes, on Apple Podcasts,
Yeah, it means
like,
a lot.
It's the algorithm for top podcasts. It's based on, download numbers, streams, plays, however you quantify that, subscribers, and it's also weighted heavily for new podcasts so they can help rise quick. But then it also has how many comments and reviews are the comments good, and how frequently are those comments happening.
Right.
And so like it's a great way to help people, just like if you like the show, leaving that rating and review really helps new people discover it.
Yeah.
And so I err on the side of telling people, like I in a former life, I worked a lot in like churches and ministries, and like it's regular if you've been in those places, like they'll do like an offering or a tithe where they might pass a plate or whatever.
Yeah.
And like a lot of times when people talk about it, they talk about it like it's your duty and it's like your moral, which, without getting into too much detail, like sometimes it's good, sometimes people abuse that too. But like I would always be one who's just like like, hey, like this money, it's helping keep the lights on. It's paying the rent for the building. It's paying the salary of the people who work here. Like just over communicate. Like, like that's a weird analogy.
No, but it's true because you can never communicate too much. Even like in stand-up, like sometimes you can never say the premise like enough. Like
and so like I think people understand, like rating and reviewing and subscribing will help the show, but if they don't know like how or why it helps,
the stakes.
Like just saying what it is, people might go, like, and not that people are dumb, but it's just sort of like, it's just, you don't think about that.
Yeah. And we take it for granted that like, might be common knowledge because we're in the podcast world. Yeah. But you might not know how much it really helps to move it forward.
But honestly, like back to Broken Record and recommending to you, like most shows I've discovered are based on that one-on-one recommendation. So yeah, I mean, the best SEO is a good product, you know? Like,
right. Yeah, exactly.
Like, so just make your show good. Obviously, like we have enough time and energy that we can do a bunch of different stuff. But if you only had one, like the highest priority is just making a good show.
Nice. Last question.
Do it.
Clipping podcast, little snippets. What do you think?
I think it's great. I don't think talking about that priority list for me personally, it's not on the top of my priority.
Right.
Maybe if I had an assistant who could do it for me. But again, I'm also going by my own, like rarely do I actually listen to those.
Yeah.
So I could be in the minority in that
right.
sense.
That's how that's exactly how I feel about it, is because I don't care about the clips, so I haven't made a priority to clip.
So in NPR, they have this, I always forget the acronym. It's either COPE or CODE. It's either code or cope.
Yeah.
But it's the idea of create once, publish everywhere, or deploy everywhere. It means the same thing.
Yeah, multiple bites of the apple.
But so it's like they'll do a thing. It comes out on a show. It comes out as a podcast. It comes out on a website. There's a text version of it that you can read like an article. You know, it's on all the platforms. It's on YouTube. It's like, what I love transcripts too, because like there's a huge population who are deaf who can't listen to a podcast, but they can read a podcast transcript. And there are amazing services now too through AI that's like can do, you know, really accurate transcriptions. Yeah. And so you can for pennies, you know. So
that's smart.
Yeah. So if you have the time and energy,
it's
of
good.
course do clips, do little things. Like the more opportunities for people to discover, the better. Yeah. But also like, okay, what's my times? What are my strengths? And how am I best? And audit your, you know, like see, is this, you know, can I do trackable links and see how these are actually playing versus other types of posts I do? And so
get a full-time data analytics person would be great.
Or just to do it, you know, like you can do that.
Yeah,
I
know.
It's not that much tougher.
As we wrap up, question for me, anything?
Why are you so nice and kind and generous with your time?
Oh.
No, but seriously, like you seem to be someone who's helpful.
Oh, thank you.
It's even in the premise of this show.
Yeah, I try to be helpful. Maybe it's my Canadianness, and
I have some Canadian in me too.
Hey, well, Canada high five. That's great. What part of Canada?
My dad's family's from Vancouver, British Columbia.
Oh, that's where I'm from. So
my great uncle through marriage is Bill Reed, who was a Haida Indian, Native American, First Nations.
Okay.
I grew up calling him a Haida Indian, so that's sorry for that slip of the tongue. But he carved like that big whale statue in Stanley Park.
Oh, wow.
And in the Hall of Congress, there's like a canoe, you know, totem style artwork.
Nice. So you're like Canadian royalty.
Well, they got a divorce, so like I've never met him. I think he's passed away now. But it's like it's one of those things like if you're in a natural history museum and there's like a you know, First Nations Pacific Northwest display, there's usually one or two art pieces by him there, and it's just like, hey.
Oh, that's super cool.
So the last time I was up there I was third grade, maybe, if not younger. So it's been a long time.
Oh, that's great. Well, I think we could talk easily for another hour, but why don't we just do it again? Have you back.
I would love to.
All right. Well, thanks for coming. It's Show Business with Andrew Steven.
At Andrew Steven on Twitter and Instagram.
And since you can never over communicate, the name of your podcast?
The History of Standup.
History of Standup. This has been It's Show Business Podcast. Good night.
Take care.